share live on Facebook.
Great, okay.
Just 1 minute. Okay, I think now you are ready. So thank you all for being here with us in one of our food talks. This is the 22nd food talk with Steph Mars, who we'd like to thank you very much for accepting our invitation to share your work with us. I only do this small presentation of you, then I will pass the word for you. So for those who doesn't know Steph, he's from Edinburgh, Scotland. Her background is in craft design and woodwork, and she was awarded the Walden UK Design Scholarship in 2007. Her volunteer work within food activism led her to completing the Master in Gastronomy at Queen Margaret University in Edinburgh in 2018. She is currently splits her time between her own design and consultancy business, Food Play Food, and Dig in Brunsfield, a community-owned greengrocer. Steph believes finding fun ways to play with food or our perceptions of it is a great way to learn more about the complex nuances of what we eat and its relation to culture, the environment, and our global food system. From mobile bike kitchens to themed film nights, Steph has a wide range of experience in planning and running events centered around food, culture, and environment. Her most recent project, Auto Dinner, was created collaboratively with artist Ari Josephine Giles and is a computer-generated guide for a playful, exploratory eating experience. So, Steph, it's with you. No, no Steph. She's gone.
The shortest food talk ever.
Hello. Hello, Steph, and you are back.
Hi, sorry about that. I never seem to have Wi-Fi problems, and just today it has decided to be a bad connection. So hopefully there'll be no issues with that.
No problem. So you can start it when you want.
Great, okay. So yeah, sorry I didn't get to hear that. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Thank you for everyone that's come to hear my talk today, and to those of you who might be listening along on Facebook. So as Ricardo has said, I've got a background in...
Sonia.
Can you hear me okay now? Can you hear me?
Hello.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Steph.
Great. Okay. Yes, if you can't hear me, just let me know. So yes, I have a background in craft and design, and I currently split my time working within alternative food networks, currently working for a community-owned greengrocer, as well as working freelance as a designer and consultant. I'm going to be changing my role within the food supply chain quite soon, moving to Locavor in Glasgow. And just a little bit about my background. My work as an activist made me more and more interested in food, and I wanted to learn more about food. and the kind of complex nuances which affect food that led to me studying for a master's in gastronomy. So the food design is sexy, and the images we often see on Instagram and social media are often alluring, sexy and provocative, and that's exactly why I chose this image, to get your attention. And who wouldn't want to work in a niche that allows you the freedom to be both playful and provocative? But I think often a lot of the hidden parts of the food system sometimes get lost within the area of food design, from supply chains and the economics to the externalities of the food system. Because they are often hidden from us, they're often difficult for citizens to engage with. And sometimes when we do engage with them, it can be complex, frustrating, and often overwhelming to work in this area. In some ways, the title of this talk today is a little deceptive. I don't think we can entirely untangle the complexity of the food system through the use of design, but we can certainly try. But additionally, as artists and designers, we can find ways to communicate some of these complexities. We can challenge or question the status quo, or we can make intentional work which focuses on improving food literacy. And today that is what I'm going to talk about a little, both focusing on some of my work and a range of work by a few different designers. So I chose this picture in this slide by shift change, as the diagram maps both some of the intrinsic features and externalities of the food system. The reason why I chose the image from this event, it was an event at Gastronomia back in London 2018, is that it really resonated. Apologies to the person whose expression might be just caught at the wrong time, but I love the expression on the guy's face. I remember going through food system lectures, and although they were great, they were often overwhelming. I'm aware that a couple of talks ago, Caroline Steele did a talk on her recent book, Zootopia. And in the book, she does a great job of unveiling so many of the factors that have led, and the histories of that have led the food system being what it is today. And all of that information can be a little bit overwhelming. How do we start to unravel some of these injustices and some of these complexities? And more importantly, how do we kind of come to sit with this discomfort and continue to be critical, both within our work, but also of our own practices? I often hear the phrase the food system is broken, but I'd really like to replace this with the term the food system is rigged. It's rigged to benefit those in positions of power, the multinationals, the political status quo. And when it's put under pressure, it isn't resilient, as we can see, which has happened with COVID outbreak. I believe strongly we need a future that is built on food sovereignty and centers food justice and regenerative food systems. So I'm just going to show the map in full. I'm not sure if you have seen it, but it shows kind of just some of the factors that go into our modern food system. There's a lot to unpick there. So why have I chosen to focus on complexity? Well, overall, the food system, like most systems, it's a complex adaptive system, and it's subject to emergence. So that means that actions can have an impact in another area you are not expecting, and it's always subject to change. Sometimes when we talk about complexity within food, we talk about complexity within a tasting experience, and complexity within food. If you think about wine, for example, it's often perceived to be desirable and often marketed as so. And Spence's paper talks a little bit more about that. However, complexity theory in relation to food and food system design is a lot more siloed, a lot more individualistic, and there isn't actually that much literature about it. Biederman in 2017 did write a paper about complexity in food design, and that breaks down a lot of the elements and states it's the responsibility of the designer to consider the complexities of food, be it systemic or cultural. And of course, a work produced can be both tangible or intangible, and one such intangible result can be intent to influence behavior. The image I've got in the background is from an artwork by Gillian Waring, and I love it because it, for me, it kind of shows those connections. And I actually used to have that postcard on my wall as a teenager. I remember picking it up from Habitat, which is a British design store. And in the end, I worked for Habitat as well. So it does just show those kind of connections. As well as looking at the food system as a whole, we can also look at the systems involved in kind of our personal connections with food. We can look at a human element of a relation to food, and our body itself is a complex system, especially the brain. We experience both the world and food in a multisensory way, as shown by Spence in his work in gastrophysics. And Wrigley and Ramsey also stressed the need to incorporate the emotional connections with food into the discipline of food design. These can help create alternative solutions to a multifaceted food system. And they talk about three elements of visceral, behavioral, and reflective element. And I find that interesting that they kind of overlap with the theories of transformative learning. Going from complexity, I'm also going to talk very briefly about food literacy. Because in the question we're saying, how can food design help communicate the issues of complexity, and can this lead to greater food literacy? So just to quickly discuss some of the discourses on food literacy. Food literacy can be defined as proficiency in food-related skills and knowledge. However, the discourse has very much two paradigms. This could fall into a neoliberal consciousness model or a critical conscious model, which kind of goes on a step further in some of the discussions. And the Truman paper kind of delves into that a bit more. Goldstein discusses a critical conscious model as being an active engagement in democratic practice within the food system to nurture ecological health, disrupt current food practices, whilst considering cultural, sociological, and ecological environmental factors. So that's really taking a step further than learning about skills and things. It actually involves a taking action part. That also has an interesting overlap with transformative learning, which is also being described as a really good way to help promote food literacy. And some of the steps taken in transformative learning involve critical reflection, engaging in the discourse, but most importantly, the step of taking action as well. And I guess this is kind of a point at which we want to reflect on our own roles within the food system. I've recently heard a talk by Mark Brand, who was asking people to reflect upon your role in your system. And he asks, how do you use what you learned? Are you using your privilege? How do you wield your privilege? And how are you making sure you don't just do work that's already been done? And how do you make sure that you are giving voices to people who may not have those voices? So having just kind of defined a little bit about complexity and food literacy, the reasons I've introduced those is they were an important part of my research that I did for my master's. In that, I kind of combined complexity theory, research on food literacy in looking at educational aspects of food experience design. I don't want to go into too much detail about that research today because there is a paper called Squid Ink, Designing Transformative Experiences, which was part of the eFood 2019 proceedings. But the overall research question I posed was, how do artist-led projects engage the public with the complexities of food? And in this slide here, you can see kind of some of the themes that were used to kind of pull this all together. The research focused on a case study, which used qualitative evaluation of 2 artist-led workshops. These workshops took the form of a presentation about the art of paper making, and then we went on to make Gyotaku print with using squid as the material, and then finally we cooked and ate the squid using a recipe. So there was instructions on how to fillet and cook the squid. This project was really interesting, especially in its really interdisciplinary nature, as it really threw up a lot of questions about food and aesthetics, and also the complex factors in both food choice, skills, and how culture affects skills, but also how we experience food, and things such as down to even the understanding of the paper during the event. There were so many factors in kind of assessing what the stakeholders of the event were trying to achieve in having some educational ambition, compared to how the participants experienced it. And there were kind of few points that I took away from it. Firstly, that the role of the artist or the designer is integral in designing meaningful and transformative food experiences, that these must also kind of meet a kind of aesthetic, but also an educational goal. And in doing this, there is obviously a bit of a conflict between those two things. And once again, the second point is I must kind of take caution in evaluating artist-led food projects that they don't reinforce a kind of neoliberal consciousness model of food literacy, and instead they go on to stand in the second one, so a kind of going to critical reflection and taking action. In terms of the critical consciousness, one of the parts I was talking about is a bit about the silo of art or design, in that it could be thought of microtopia, as in, are we preaching to the converted? Things like that. And the third point that I took away with it was to do with multisensory design. And although there's a lot of literature about multisensory design for food education for children, it's still kind of lacking a bit on how that can be used to help with adult education. After all, we need to convince adults to educate the children and incorporate food into the education system more and more. So, moving on from a little bit on the research project, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about it afterwards. I'm going to talk about a few food design projects that I think do a lovely job of communicating some of these complexities with food. Firstly, the Save Food from the Fridge project centres on food waste. Food waste obviously being a massive problem within the food system. And this project by Jude and David combines the furniture and product design in the food use of the shelves, with the goal of saving food from the fridge, but also it combines that with traditional knowledge. It goes one step further as a research project by actually collecting traditional ecological knowledge from people around the world, from many different cultures. So it functions as both product design, whilst understanding the complexities of food waste, the cultural differences in how we view or store food, and improves food literacy by collating, archiving, and transmitting this knowledge. And I believe they've recently published a book in Korea. So some of the individual elements of these include the symbiosis of potato and apple, the breathing on eggs, which you can see in the shelf in the top left, humidity of vegetables, that's the one with the sand, dryness of spices, and the carrot is the verticality of root vegetables. The interesting thing about this is traditional knowledge, and Jihan says, throughout the research into the current situation of food preservation, I've learned that we hand over the responsibility of taking food to the technology. That is the fridge. We don't observe the food anymore, and we don't understand how to treat it. Therefore, my design looks at reintroducing and re-evaluating traditional oral knowledge of food, which is closer to nature. It aims to bring back connections between different levels of living beings and the food ingredients as other living beings. And this is interesting because traditional ecological knowledge is something that is harder to find, so certainly in its correlation to views of science. Traditional ecological knowledge can be described as a cumulative body of knowledge and beliefs handed down through generations about relationships of living beings with one another and their environment. It's not concerned with theory or controlling nature, and often there's enhanced appreciation of this sort of knowledge within certain cultures or indigenous groups. However, the documentation of the traditional ecological knowledge is a really important tool for social change. And if we lose this knowledge, we won't get it back. So it's really important to kind of document this. So moving on to something a little bit different, second project I chose was The Exchange by Mariah Vogelsang. It's interesting as it works in conjunction with an intensive chicken farmer, and it examines economics by straddling the complexities of the investment with capital, with animal ethics. And Mariah kind of describes the process of picking the egg upon opening an account at the exchange. You receive a fertilized egg. You can take the egg home and eat it, but you can also choose to hatch it. If you hatch it, you'll get a broiler chicken that can grow into meat. If you have a hen, you can also keep your chicken to let it lay eggs. You might get a rooster. Together with a hen, you could produce new chicks. In this way, you go on to kind of save your own natural capital. It grows by the attention and care you give it to it. You can't accumulate the capital without looking after it. So the interest rate is determined by natural laws rather than market forces. So that way it kind of critiques economics and also provokes people into examining some of the ethical issues around consumption and animal rights. This project just takes one tiny aspect of the food system and looks at it in detail for citizens to engage with and reflect upon. It is possible that it could lead to them thinking about some of those complexities in a different way. The third project I've chosen is a hot topic for those of us based in the UK, the B word as we call it. Although we hoped it didn't happen, especially in Scotland, because we didn't vote for it, it has happened and we have to suffer the consequences of it. The Brexit Banquet by the Centre for Genomic Gastronomy is a speculative design project that asks the question, what could the future of British food look like as a result of Brexit? Having said that, it's not a gastro-nationalist food project. It examines both food in the UK that could be grown and produced as sovereign, but it also incorporates trade routes and possible supply chains from outside Europe. And additionally, it kind of asks people to kind of come up with their own speculative ideas for dishes. I think it'd be really interesting to do a look at a Scottish version. Things that initially came to mind, things like shellfish, which are having a problem with the supply chain, wild venison, and then we have traditional products such as piecemeal, bear meal, seaweed again in Scotland, which has quite an overlap of interest with Portugal. The dish pictured in this one is called No Fish, No Chips, and its main component is sand eel, which is lightly fried in butter with some good old mushy peas and samphire. The Centre for Genomic Gastronomy chose sand eel as it was previously banned off the east coast of Scotland and the northeast of England to protect the food supply for fish and seabird colonies. And so they were wondering whether the UK might still try and protect those, or might they develop policy, change policy to market processed sand eels on a global marketplace. The reason that there's also no potatoes in that recipe is that although we do grow potatoes and we're very good at growing potatoes in the UK, the majority of fish and chip shops, the chips in fish and chip shops that come into the UK are often pre-cut, frozen and packaged, and they are delivered from the Netherlands. So that we're having a look at kind of a possibility of hyperlocal plus more global food. So I want to move on to something that I've been a bit interested in, and looks at the connections between place and dish via the tableware. And at the moment, it's kind of got a working title of Terroir and Tableware. In this project, I'm kind of hoping to ask the questions: how do we communicate place via tableware? What impact could this have on a taste experience? Could it help communicate the complexity of ecosystems, as well as communicate traditional methods of production in craft, or possibly innovative methods, as well as just simply enhancing an experience, let's say at a restaurant or in a taste through the tableware. So there's a few photos of designers that have been working in this way. The dish on the top left is from Silo London, who are a zero waste restaurant, and they have created this glass dish from their waste glass within the restaurant through a producer Potter's Thumb. On the bottom right is work by Maria Roy, who is studied materials, and she was kind of forced to go hyperlocal due to a result of being in lockdown during COVID. So she dug a trench in her back garden and built a kiln in order to kind of explore the soil around her. And I believe it is her aim to return the vessels she made back to the soil afterwards. On the left is, can you hear me okay? Yeah. On the left is well-crafted ceramics by Pascal Baudois, who is known as a wild food expert and a fermenter, and has also recently started doing experiments with natural clay from the environment. And then we've also got some examples of biodesign, so such as the fruit peel vessels in the top, and mycelium grown vessels as well. So yes, these are all things that I'm very interested in perhaps working on in the future. I also want to talk a little bit about the last project that I've been working on, which I started developing collaboratively with Harry Josie Giles during lockdown last year. So it was about a year ago today that we first started working collaboratively online, making little poems and scripts of code. Initially, we had planned for this project to be used live within settings. I had a good working relationship with a Centre for Arts in Glasgow, and they were doing a programme on food rituals, and this came to mind as a way of looking at kind of critiquing technology into how we eat. So Auto de Nuit takes a playful look at the eating experience in the way that the Save Food from the Fridge project critiqued the role of the fridge. We also have a look at the role of tech within the food system. Every day we hand over autonomy, Every day we hand over autonomy to algorithms. You know, we decide what music we listen to using Spotify, what news we follow, and whose opinions we look to through things like Twitter. But when we discuss food and robots, we usually focus on the uses of technology to either prepare, pack, or distribute food. And I know there are also projects that look at the creation of a dish using procedurally generated processes. But rarely do we entrust them with how we actually approach the ritual of going about eating our food. So it's a very playful way of looking at this. And Harry Josie had done similar work using playful games and technology to look at experiencing and exploring the city. So when we came to do that, we came up with a set of rules we wanted to focus on in order to create the Auto de Nuit. and you can see those on the left. It was an open source project, and it kind of sits in two places at the moment. So there's a never ending meal, which works as a Twitter bot, but we also wanted something with a bit more of a narrative experience for it. So a beginning, a middle and an end, kind of a reflective process to the meal. So it also has a platform on NeoCities. On the right hand side is a generated meal that I did yesterday. That's kind of the full iteration of that version, and what you do is you click on the blue to get your next command. So basically the computer prompts you to do something, and when you're ready for your next instruction, you click the command and it'll tell you your next part. So it creates infinite varieties of how to go about engaging with the food. And we took a lot of care to try and make this as multisensory as possible. Obviously some of the things it comes up with are quite obscure, as we're bound by a kind of framework of language as well. So yes, again, in terms of complexities, I guess there's two parts that Auto-Denure is addressing there. It's addressing existing technology platforms and how we use them, such as Twitter. It's looking at how do we accept the rituals in our everyday lives, and also it's looking at kind of playful technologies as well. Yeah.
Sorry, it's because technology is against us, and I don't know why, but our session will end in less than a minute. So I will ask to all of you to go to the same link again, and we'll start it, okay? I'm really sorry, it's the first...
Oh, well, that's fine. It's pretty much the end of all my slides. So,
yeah, but it's the first time that this happens. I don't know why. So I will ask just to go to the same link, okay?
Yep.
Okay, see you in a minute.
Okay, see you in a minute.